It is still a profoundly moving statement of our value, and it has never been more relevant than it is now. The announcement came softly, yet its weight was unbearable. A single statement from the palace, spoken in solemn tones, drifted across television screens and radios. His Majesty the King's condition has taken a grave turn. No alarms, no grand ceremony, just quiet devastation. It was the kind of news that doesn't shout but settles deep in the chest, leaving a silence too heavy to fill. Across the United Kingdom, that silence spread like a shadow. At Windsor Castle, the wind carried the faint chime of the chapel bells. Guards stood motionless, their reflections flickering in the pools of rain forming on the cobblestones. Inside, corridors once filled with courtly routine now felt like the hallways of a vigil. The crown, gleaming eternal, rested behind locked glass as if holding its breath with the rest of the nation. In the distance, the soft murmurs of prayer rose from the gathered crowd. Old men removed their hats. Mothers held children closer. For the first time in years, strangers in the streets looked at one another not as commuters, but as mourners. Even those who never followed royal affairs felt the moment's gravity. The king, who had waited a lifetime to serve, was now fighting a battle only his strength and faith could win. Within the family, there was movement behind the stillness. Prince William was seen arriving at Windsor in a dark coat, face pale, eyes steady. Princess Anne followed shortly after, her presence brisk but visibly shaken. Yet Queen Camilla remained unseen, and that absence carried its own quiet thunder. The monarchy, once a symbol of constancy, now stood at the edge of uncertainty once more. And as the world turned its eyes toward Windsor, one question hung like fog over the castle's ancient towers. How much longer can the crown endure the weight of sorrow? To understand the sorrow surrounding Windsor that night, one must first look back at the fragile months leading up to it. The signs had been there, though hidden behind polished smiles and carefully managed appearances. King Charles had long carried the burden of illness quietly, insisting that duty must come before rest. But those who had been close enough to see the strain in his posture or the tremor in his voice during public engagements knew the truth. The king's strength was fading. Behind the grandeur of the crown lay an exhausting schedule. Even as doctors urged caution, Charles continued to fulfill engagements across the country. In the summer, he attended the opening of a new Veterans Memorial in Portsmouth, determined to stand unaided during the ceremony. Yet cameras caught what his courtiers tried to hide. His hands gripping the lectern for balance, his breath shallow, his complexion pale beneath the autumn light. By early October, the strain became undeniable. Palace staff began to shorten his public duties, attributing his absence to routine rest. But in private, medical teams were increasing their visits to Clarence House, and new security arrangements quietly transferred authority over key state documents to Prince William's office. It was not a declaration of regency, but it was close enough to whisper of one. Within the family, emotions ran high. Queen Camilla grew protective to the point of isolation, shutting out advisors and refusing press appearances. Some said she spent long evenings in the royal library, poring over the late Queen Elizabeth's diaries, as if searching for guidance in the words of a monarch who had faced her own share of lonely nights. Others claimed she kept a locked chest of personal notes and correspondence, a private archive of her years beside Charles, guarded in the Windsor vaults. The palace never confirmed it, but the image of Camilla alone among her treasures haunted the public imagination. Prince William, meanwhile, was thrust into a delicate balancing act. He had to step forward as the nation's voice without appearing to overstep his father. At public events, he spoke of continuity and hope, yet his tone carried an undertone of preparation, as if he already knew what was coming. Behind the scenes, he began taking private briefings from the Privy Council, learning protocols that would once have been his father's responsibility. It was duty accelerated by circumstance. Princess Anne, ever steadfast, became the quiet pillar between them all. She managed communications with the king's medical team, ensuring information was controlled but truthful. One insider later said, and was the only one who still spoke to everyone. She was the glue holding together a family slowly unraveling. Outside those castle walls, the public mood shifted. The nation that had only recently adjusted to saying, "God save the king," now whispered it again in anxiety rather than celebration. News networks replayed footage of Charles's final public speech, analyzing his pauses, his choice of words, even the slight downturn of his smile. Some claimed he looked resigned. Others said he seemed at peace. Yet the tension wasn't only emotional, it was constitutional. If the king's health failed further, decisions about state leadership would fall to a handful of senior figures within hours. Behind closed doors, the machinery of monarchy was humming, preparing for a moment everyone dreaded but none could admit aloud. As the clock turned past midnight in Windsor, the castle's lights glowed dimly against the drizzle. Somewhere deep inside those ancient halls, doctors watched monitors, aides whispered over sealed documents, and the sound of footsteps echoed softly on marble floors. The palace had begun to brace itself for what history might soon call the night the crown trembled. The first true sign that the situation had turned critical came not from an official statement, but from what was missing. For days, royal reporters noticed an unsettling silence. The king's calendar, once packed with engagements, was suddenly blank. The royal flag that usually signified his presence at Windsor remained lowered, and the palace gates, usually bustling with cars and aides, stood eerily still. The silence was broken by a single haunting image. Late one night, a passing motorist captured a photograph of ambulance lights flickering behind Windsor's iron gates. Within hours, that picture spread like wildfire across social media. The palace tried to downplay it as a standard medical precaution, but Britain had seen this pattern before. When the blue lights appear behind royal walls, it means something serious has happened. Soon after, whispers began among the staff. A nurse, accidentally overheard by a reporter, mentioned that a special medical team from King Edward VI's hospital had been flown in. That institution, long associated with royal treatment, was not called unless the situation was grave. Courtiers described the king's suite at Windsor being transformed overnight, equipment installed, security tightened, corridors cleared. The scene inside the castle had shifted from regal to clinical. Still, the palace refused to speak. Their silence only fueled speculation. News networks began running hourly updates with increasingly somber tones, and the British public found itself trapped in a familiar dread, the same quiet fear that had lingered in 2022 when the Queen's health began to fail. One commentator put it best, the monarchy doesn't announce tragedy, it whispers it first. As dawn broke, Prince William and Princess Anne were both seen arriving at the castle.